at the confidence of Jesus in prayer. Look at Matthew 26, verse 53. You know, Judas had just betrayed Jesus, and they've just come to arrest him. They've just come to arrest him. And then Peter moved immediately. Jesus maybe didn't know he had a sword. Though earlier he had asked them, he told them that he that doesn't have a sword, you sell your coat and buy a sword. So maybe Peter obeyed that literally. And maybe went and bought a sword. And Jesus didn't know the guy was equipped with a sword, waiting for anything to happen. So when they came and arrested Jesus, before they could say Jack, Peter took out his sword and cut off the ears of, what was that man's name? Marcus, right? The servant of the high priest. Before he knew it, the man's ear was on the ground. So that next time he will hear. And Jesus, to Peter's chagrin, Jesus told him, he said, put back your sword into the sheath. Those that live by the sword shall die by the sword. But you're the one that told us to buy a sword. You know. So he picked it, blew away the sand from it, and put it back on Marcus' ear. So at that point in time, he could still do any miracle. And that was the stupid calculation of Judas. He thought he would take the money and Jesus would escape. He didn't know they would kill him. So that's the background of what we have here. So he was addressing Peter here. Here, go back to New King James. He was addressing Peter here when Peter carried out that act. He said, get it in New King James, please. He said, or do you think that I cannot now, even now, pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? Look at that confidence. Peter, do you think that even now, as we are standing, I cannot talk to my Father, and he will send me more than 12 legions of angels? When you go, find out what a legion is. And then we are talking of 12 legions. And Jesus was not playing with words. He said, if I ask now, the Father will give me 12 legions, more than 12 legions of angels. Do you think I am not in that position to ask? And he will give it to me. He said, this is not the hour, what we are here for. This is not the moment. But then look at the next verse. How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen this way, that I must be crucified and die, and so on? In other words, he allowed the will of God to be carried out. But look at that confidence he had in prayer. For Hagin, when he was in his 30s, they were about 35. The wife was sick with something that was terminal. The wife was sick, and she knew she was going to die. And he knew she was going to die. He knew. And so he was praying. But there are certain sometimes you don't talk to each other, even though you know these things. Everybody keeps it to himself. But he knew and she knew. So he began to pray. He told God, say, listen, I'm in my 30s. And if my wife dies now, I'm going to remarry. And then I will start training the new person again for ministry. He was asking God, please spare her life. And then one of the days that Jesus visited him, Jesus talked to him about other things and then talked to him about the wife. And spoke to him and said that she was destined to die early. But because you asked me, I'm going to let her live. He said, because you asked me. James says, you receive not because you ask not. He said she was destined to die early. But because you asked me, I'm going to spare her. He said she's going to live. She was actually healed of cancer, but it wasn't even the cancer that was about to kill her then. The cancer, by an appearance of Jesus, she was due for an operation. Jesus appeared to her, smiled on her, and that's how cancer disappeared. She lived to be about 90 years before she died. The husband died in his 87th year. He was 86 plus. The same person that would have died in her 30s said, but because you asked me. Because you asked me. When we tell people pray, it's not a waste of time. So, look at John chapter 11, verses 41 and 42. Now, Jesus had a very big assignment in his heart. Lazarus, his friend, was dead. And Jesus was there. He had been buried for 4 days. He was dead. Then they took away the stone from the place where Jesus asked them to roll away the stone that covered his tomb. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Obviously, he has told the Father to raise Lazarus. Are you hearing me? And I know a place of knowing, confidence in prayer. And I know you hear me always. I know you always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know you hear me always. How do this kind of confidence in prayer is not an accident. It's not a chance happening. There are certain things that lead to it. Let's look at some of them. I have in mind to talk about 4. Then next time we talk about 4. Developing confidence in prayer. Mostly, let's pull from the example of the life of Jesus. It results from certain factors and practices. Number 1, relationship. Relationship. Being sons and children of God and being conscious of it. Virtually every time you can hardly hear Jesus refer to God by the name God. It was always my Father. One time I remember clearly often that he called him God is when he was talking to Mary Magdalene and those people that saw him first when he rose. He says, "For I go to my Father and your Father and to my God and your God." But invariably, whenever, right from the age of 12, don't you know I will be about my Father's business? Father. And he said that when we pray, we should say, our Father. Relationship. Relationship. Prayer is based on our relationship with God. He said that the prayer of the wicked is abomination to him. It's based on our relationship. Father-son relationship. Are you hearing me? Father-children relationship. We are children of God. We are the offspring of God. So Jesus will always call God my Father. My Father is working and I'm working. My Father. Don't you know I be about my Father's business? My Father is always with me. Relationship. Jesus always called God my Father. And he said, when we pray, we should address it to our Father who is in heaven, in the realm of the Spirit. Our Father. Is somebody here? Is somebody here? Our Father. No, he's your Father. Brethren, now are we sons of God. It does not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone that has this hope in him purifies himself as he is pure. Our Father. Look up to heaven and say, Father. Call God your Father. Can you close your eyes and look into his eyes with the eyes of your spirit and say, Father. Say, Abba, Father. Talk to the Father when you pray.